The music in the studio was too bright for the hour, all clean beats and forced momentum. But Stacy stood still with her hands resting on the cold curve of the treadmill rail, as if her body had forgotten what it came here to do. A bead of sweat slipped down the inside of her sports bra, slow as a secret. She stared at her own reflection in the wall-length mirror, her face already flushed, hair pulled high, the same careful blonde halo she always wore when she needed to look like she had her life under control. The mirror returned her in fragments. Shoulder, collarbone, the faint bruise-colored pressure line where her leggings cinched too tight. It shouldn't matter. Thought arrived the way it always did, lately. Automatic, defensive, already exhausted. Behind her, someone laughed at the water fountain. A guy dropped a dumbbell with a thud that traveled up through the rubber floor and into the bones of the place. Life, indifferent. The air smelled like disinfectant overlaid with sweat and citrus. Somebody's expensive deodorant insisting itself into the room. Then the citrus shifted. Not stronger exactly. Closer. Stacy didn't turn right away. She kept her eyes on the treadmill display, watching the numbers idle at 0 as if she could hold herself there, paused. Until the moment passed. She tightened her fingers around the rail. Her knuckles went pale, then loosened again. A voice drifted near her shoulder. Warm, low, slightly rough at the edges like it had lived in cold weather, and was still surprised by heat. "You're not starting," the voice said, not accusing, not teasing. Just noticing. Stacy's throat tightened before she answered. She swallowed. Thinking. A soft sound, almost a laugh, but kept private. Thinking is fine, but it's cruel to come all this way just to stand here and suffer. Stacy finally looked. Charlotte was beside her, angled in the casual way some people manage without effort. There was a towel looped around one shoulder, dark hair damp at the roots, copper red and heavy, pulled back but not tamed. Freckles scattered across her nose as if the sun had left fingerprints there. Her green eyes held steady, too steady, and Stacy felt that familiar internal stutter, the moment her mind tried to file Charlotte away into something safe. Trainer. Employee. Stranger. But her body didn't cooperate. Her body registered, close. Warm. Real. Charlotte's tank top clung lightly to her, and there was nothing obscene about it, no performance. Just the plain fact of a strong torso that looked like it belonged to someone who knew what her hands could do. Stacy's gaze snagged, and then snapped away too quickly. It shouldn't matter. Charlotte leaned forward and pressed a button on the treadmill with one finger, delicate as a threat. The belt began to move, slow at first. "There," Charlotte said. "Now you can think while walking." Multitasking. Stacy's mouth went dry. She stepped onto the moving belt, because the alternative was standing there admitting she didn't know how to exist near this woman without becoming strange. She began to walk. The rhythm steadied her, one foot, then the other. Like something in her could be coaxed back into the world if she repeated a simple motion long enough. Her breath found its pattern. Inhale. Exhale. The air was cool in her nose, warmer as it left her mouth. Charlotte stayed beside the treadmill, elbows resting on the console edge as if she belonged there. As if she had been waiting in that exact spot for Stacy to arrive. "You come at the same time most days," Charlotte said. Stacy glanced at her again, quick. "I do." Charlotte's smile was small. "Yes. Like you're keeping an appointment with yourself." Stacy felt the comment land somewhere tender. She didn't know why. It was too simple to hurt. But it did. "I just like routines," Stacy said. Charlotte's eyes moved over her face, not hungry, not invasive. Curious in a way that made Stacy feel seen instead of assessed. Routines can be comforting, or they can be a cage. Stacy's heart gave a hard, dumb knock against her ribs. She adjusted her wristband, an unnecessary gesture, but her hands needed something to do. The Velcro rasped softly. "I'm fine," she said, and she hated how practiced it sounded. Charlotte's gaze flicked to Stacy's hand, the wristband, and lingered for half a second too long. A pause. Not dramatic. Not spoken. Just held. "Sure," Charlotte said gently, as if agreeing with a child who insisted the sky wasn't blue. Stacy's cheeks warmed more than the treadmill could explain. She turned her eyes forward again, watching her reflection in the mirror as she walked. In the mirror, Charlotte looked like a presence beside her, anchoring the frame, changing the entire image without doing much at all. The belt rolled beneath Stacy's feet. The music pulsed. Somewhere behind them, a group of friends argued about protein powder flavors. The gym smelled like metal and rubber and citrus, and the faint sweetness of someone's perfume that had no business surviving sweat. Stacy tried to focus on her breathing, but her thoughts had learned Charlotte's shape. The week before, Charlotte had corrected her squat form with a few words and a demonstration. Nothing more. Stacy had laughed too loudly at a joke she didn't fully hear. 2 days after that, Charlotte had offered her a new stretch routine, leaning close enough for Stacy to catch the heat of her skin. That same night, Stacy had stood in her bathroom staring at her own mouth in the mirror as if it were evidence. No. Not that. Not exactly. It wasn't about mouths. Or bodies. Or the obvious things people like to turn desire into because the obvious things were easier to name. It was the way Charlotte noticed. The way her attention had weight, even when it was light. It shouldn't matter. Stacy increased the speed without meaning to. Her steps sharpened. Her breath turned louder. Charlotte straightened. You okay? Yeah, Stacy said too fast. Just. She stopped. Restarted. Just trying to work. Charlotte's expression softened, almost tender, but she didn't reach for Stacy or crowd her. She simply stayed. Presence without demand. Okay, Charlotte said. Then work. And for several minutes, that was all that happened. Stacy walked. Charlotte stood beside her. The world continued. It was almost unbearable how ordinary it looked from the outside. Inside Stacy, something kept tipping. A memory slid in unwanted, as if her mind had been waiting for an opening. Her mother's voice at dinner 2 nights ago, light, falsely cheerful, talking about the man she wanted Stacy to meet. As if meeting were harmless. As if a dinner wasn't a trap. He's established, her mother had said. And older. Which means he knows what he wants. Stacy had kept her face calm. She'd lifted her fork. She'd taken a bite she couldn't taste. Her father had added, as if offering a gift, he's serious, he's not like these boys your age. They had been so relieved saying it. So certain the problem was simply finding the right man, the right arrangement, the right story to tell their friends. Stacy had smiled at the right moment. She had nodded. She had made herself small enough to fit inside their expectation. Later, alone in her bedroom, she'd pressed her palm against her sternum to feel her heart pounding like it wanted out. She'd whispered into the dark, barely moving her lips. It shouldn't matter. As if repeating it could make it true. Now, on the treadmill, the phrase returned again, and the irony of it, how much it clearly mattered, made her throat sting. Charlotte shifted her weight. The towel slipped slightly from her shoulder. She caught it, a quick movement of her hand, and Stacy's eyes followed without permission. Charlotte's fingers were long. Her nails short, practical. The kind of hands that could be gentle because they were strong. Stacy felt a low heat gather at the base of her spine, quiet but insistent. Not a flare. An awakening. She looked away again. Charlotte didn't comment. She glanced toward the front desk where someone called her name. A colleague, perhaps. The outside world tapping on the glass. I have a client in 10, Charlotte said. But. The word hovered between them like a held breath. Stacy's pulse tripped. She wanted Charlotte to finish it. She wanted her to stop. She wanted too many things at once. Charlotte's eyes stayed on Stacy's face. You're doing good, she said finally, and the softness of it felt like a hand on Stacy's throat. Stacy's voice came out smaller than she meant. Thanks. Charlotte hesitated, almost imperceptibly, then leaned closer to the treadmill console as if to adjust something. Her forearm brushed the edge of Stacy's hand. Barely. Not even skin on skin, just the whisper of contact through a thin layer of fabric. Stacy's body reacted before her mind could give it language. Her breath caught. Her stomach tightened. Her skin flared hot under her sports bra. The contact was gone immediately, but the echo remained, electric, bright, unnervingly sweet. Charlotte's eyes flicked up. For half a second, Stacy thought she saw it, an awareness, a question, a pulse of something that matched what Stacy was trying to hide. Then Charlotte straightened, careful as if she understood the fragility of the space she'd entered. Sorry, Charlotte murmured. Didn't mean to. It's fine, Stacy said quickly. Too quickly. Charlotte's mouth curved, not a smile exactly. More like recognition. Okay, she said. Stacy kept walking. The treadmill belt rolled on, obedient. The numbers climbed. The mirror reflected Stacy's face, focused, controlled, while inside her, something loosened like a knot giving way. A stillness came over her that didn't match her moving legs. She realized she'd been living as if the most dangerous thing in the world was being noticed for what she wanted. As if wanting itself were a betrayal. As if desire were something that happened to other people. Braver people, freer people, people who didn't sit politely at dinner tables while their futures were negotiated over roasted chicken. Her mind began to circle, returning to the same question with slight shifts, like a tongue worrying a sore tooth. What if this is me? What if it always was? What if I'm late to my own life? She felt the thought bloom, and then panic chased it. Fast, familiar. Her family's disappointment. Their confusion. The quiet, suffocating shame of being the topic of whispered conversations. And then another thought, softer, more dangerous because it didn't scare her as much as it should have. What if I don't care? No. Not that. Not exactly. She cared. Of course she cared. But maybe she was starting to care about something else more. Charlotte stepped back to give Stacy space, checking the time on her watch. The world continued around them, weights clanking, shoes squeaking, the overhead fans turning. Someone walked past with a gym bag that smelled faintly of coconut and laundry soap that. A phone buzzed on a nearby bench. Charlotte slung her towel over her shoulder again and nodded toward the water station. You're going to want water. Trust me. Stacy nodded, though her throat felt like it belonged to someone else. Charlotte began to walk away, then paused and turned back, as if reconsidering something. Her gaze held Stacy's for a beat longer than professional courtesy required. A subtle friction. A delay. Hey, Charlotte said, voice lower now. After you're done, if you want, I can show you a stretch that helps with tight hips. People underestimate it. Stacy's breath stuttered. Tight hips. The words were innocent. They could be. They should be. But the way Charlotte said them, calm, unhurried, made Stacy feel suddenly too aware of her own body, of where she held tension, of how long she'd been holding it. It shouldn't matter. But it did. Stacy forced herself to answer like a normal person. Yeah. Okay. Charlotte's smile returned, small and private. Good. Then she turned and walked toward the front desk, her red hair catching the fluorescent light like a quiet flame. Stacy watched her go. She told herself she was only watching because Charlotte was an employee, and she'd agreed to a stretch routine. She told herself this was normal. She told herself, again, it shouldn't matter. But her body didn't believe her. Her body was already remembering the brush of fabric, the nearness, the scent of citrus and sweat that felt like summer pressed against skin. Her body was already storing it as something to return to later, alone, when the world was quiet enough to admit truth. The treadmill kept moving under her feet, steady and relentless. Stacy kept walking, but something inside her had stopped pretending it could go back. And when she finally reached for the water bottle and the cup holder, her hand shook just slightly, enough to make the plastic rattle against the console. She held it still. She held herself still. In the mirror, her eyes looked different, like someone who had just heard a sound in the dark, and realized it was coming from inside her own chest. Stacy felt the echo of Charlotte's presence long after she disappeared behind the front desk. It stayed in her shoulders, in the soft ache at her hips, in the way her breath refused to settle into anything uncomplicated. She finished her workout on autopilot. The numbers on the treadmill blurred into meaninglessness. When she finally stepped off, her legs carried her toward the water station without deliberation. She drank too fast. Water spilled down her chin, cold and startling, and she wiped it away with the back of her hand, annoyed at herself for needing the interruption. She checked the clock. Charlotte still had a few minutes. Stacy told herself she was only waiting because she'd agreed to it. Because stretching was practical. Because tight hips were a problem, apparently. She leaned against the wall near the mat area, pretending to scroll through her phone, her thumb hovering uselessly over the screen. The gym shifted around her. A woman laughed nearby, sharp and bright. Someone dropped a kettlebell. The overhead fans hummed steadily, pushing warm air down into the room. When Charlotte returned, she didn't announce herself. She simply appeared beside Stacy, her reflection sliding into view in the mirror before her physical presence fully registered. You survived, Charlotte said lightly. Stacy glanced up. Barely. Charlotte smiled, the corner of her mouth tilting in a way that made Stacy's chest tighten. Come on, mats are free. They walked together across the floor, close enough that their arms almost brushed. Almost. The nearness felt deliberate without being pointed. Charlotte knelt to spread out a mat, smoothing it with her palms as if she were laying something precious down carefully. Shoes off, Charlotte said. Trust me. Stacy did. She slipped her sneakers off and felt the cool mat under her bare feet, grounding in a way she hadn't expected. She lowered herself onto the mat, mirroring Charlotte's movements without thinking about it. They sat facing each other, legs folded. Charlotte adjusted her posture, spine long, shoulders relaxed. Okay, first thing, just breathe. Stacy almost laughed. Almost. But she inhaled anyway. The breath filled her chest slowly, deliberately. Charlotte watched, not intrusively, but attentively, like she was reading something subtle in the way Stacy's ribcage moved. Again, Charlotte said softly. They breathed together. The silence stretched, not awkward, not empty. It settled between them like something shared. Charlotte began to demonstrate a stretch, rotating her hips with an ease that made Stacy painfully aware of her own stiffness. You hold tension here, Charlotte said, gesturing vaguely. Most people do. Especially people who manage themselves a lot. Stacy's fingers curled into the mat. What does that mean? Charlotte glanced up, their eyes meeting. People who spend a lot of time keeping things together. Stacy felt the words land and stay. She followed Charlotte's instructions, shifting her weight, letting her knees fall outward. The sensation was unfamiliar, vulnerable. Her hips resisted at first, then slowly softened. She exhaled without realizing she'd been holding her breath. Charlotte moved closer, not touching yet. Is that okay? Yes, Stacy said, though her voice sounded different to her own ears. Charlotte nodded. Tell me if it isn't. She placed her hands lightly on Stacy's thighs, guiding the stretch with careful pressure. The contact was professional. Appropriate. And still, Stacy's body lit up with awareness, every nerve tracking Charlotte touch as if it were learning a new language. Her breath went shallow. Charlotte noticed immediately. She eased back, her hands lifting away. Too much? No, Stacy said quickly. Then, softer, it's fine. Charlotte watched her for a moment, reading the space. Then she adjusted her position, sitting back on her heels. We can just hold it. No pressure. They stayed like that, Stacy stretching, Charlotte nearby, observing. The gym continued its steady rhythm around them. People moved past. Someone turned the music up slightly. Stacy felt strangely exposed, sitting there barefoot, legs open, breath uneven. And yet, safe. After a while, Charlotte sat back down across from her. You'll feel that later, she said. In a good way. Stacy nodded. I already do. Charlotte's eyes softened, and for a brief second, something unspoken passed between them. A recognition that neither of them named. They stood together, rolled the mats back into place. Same time tomorrow? Charlotte asked casually. Stacy hesitated. The word tomorrow felt heavier than it should have. Yeah, she said. I'm usually here, Charlotte finished. I know. Stacy laughed, surprised by the sound. Right. They parted at the lockers, Charlotte heading toward the staff area. Stacy watched her go, again telling herself it meant nothing. That night, Stacy lay awake longer than usual. The house was quiet, her parents already asleep down the hall. The familiar ceiling fan turned slowly overhead, shadows drifting across the walls. She replayed the day in fragments, the way Charlotte's hands had hovered before touching, the calm in her voice, the way breathing together had felt intimate in a way Stacy didn't have words for. She pressed her palm against her hip, feeling the dull ache beneath the skin. It shouldn't matter. Thought surfaced again, tired now. Less convincing. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from her mother. Dinner tomorrow. We're excited for you to meet him. Stacy closed her eyes. The next morning at the gym, Charlotte greeted her with a nod and a quiet smile, as if nothing had shifted. And yet, everything felt slightly different. They settled into a rhythm over the following days. Nothing dramatic happened. No declarations. No sudden gestures. Just repetition. Charlotte corrected Stacy's form. Stacy listened. Sometimes they stretched together. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes Charlotte was busy with clients and only offered a glance and a "hey, you" as she passed. Each small interaction lodged itself inside Stacy. The gym became a place of anticipation instead of routine. She found herself arriving earlier, lingering longer. She noticed details she'd never paid attention to before. The way Charlotte tied her hair back between sessions, the slight scar on her forearm, the way her laughter softened when she spoke to kids. They talked more. About the weather. About Canada. About the absurd price of parking in California. Charlotte told her about snowstorms that lasted days, about missing the quiet of cold mornings. Stacy told her about growing up in the same house, about never leaving town for long. "You ever think about it?" Charlotte asked one afternoon as they walked side by side toward the exit. "Leaving?" Stacy considered the question. "I don't know if I'd know how." Charlotte nodded. "I didn't either, not at first." They stood by the door, sunlight spilling in around them. The air outside smelled like hot pavement and jasmine from somewhere nearby. Charlotte shifted her weight, hesitated. "I was thinking, there's a coffee place down the street. Nothing fancy, but good." Stacy's heart thumped. Yeah, Charlotte said. "If you want, no pressure." The phrase echoed something familiar. "No pressure," Stacy said, and meant it. They walked together, the afternoon stretching open around them. At the cafe they sat across from each other, knees almost touching under the small table. They talked easily, slowly. Time softened. Charlotte listened when Stacy spoke. Really listened. Stacy felt herself saying things she didn't usually say, small truths, half-formed thoughts. When Charlotte laughed, Stacy felt it in her chest. When Charlotte brushed her foot against Stacy's under the table. Accidental, maybe. Stacy froze, then let it happen. The outside world kept moving. Cars passed. Someone dropped a cup. The barista called out orders. Stacy realized she was smiling without trying. Later at home, her parents talked about the dinner again. The man. His business. His expectations. Stacy nodded. Smiled. Played her role. But later, alone in her room, she thought of Charlotte's hands hovering, her voice asking permission, the warmth of shared breath. She lay on her side, staring into the dark, the same thoughts circling back with new weight. What if this is me? The question didn't scare her the way it used to. At the gym the next day, Charlotte greeted her with that same small smile. "Hey," she said. "Hey," Stacy answered. And the space between them felt full. Of possibility. Of restraint. Of something waiting. Stacy noticed the change before she understood it. It wasn't something she could point to, not a moment she could name. It lived in the in-between, how Charlotte no longer startled her by being near, how her presence had become part of the room the way light was, the way sound was. Necessary. Unquestioned. The gym felt different now. Not louder or quieter. Just inhabited. Stacy arrived one afternoon and found Charlotte already there, sitting on the floor near the stretching area, back against the mirrored wall, legs extended. She was scrolling through something on her phone, brow slightly furrowed, her hair loose today, falling in soft copper waves around her shoulders. For a second, Stacy simply stood there watching. Charlotte sensed her before she looked up. She always did. Her eyes lifted, met Stacy's, and her face changed, not dramatically, just a soft shift, like a door opening a few inches wider. "Hey," Charlotte said. The word landed warm. "Hey," Stacy answered, her voice steadier than it felt. Charlotte patted the mat beside her. "You're early." "Yeah," Stacy said. "I didn't want to rush." She kicked off her shoes and sat down next to Charlotte, close enough that their thighs touched lightly. The contact felt natural now, unremarkable in the best way. Stacy rested her hands on her knees, palms down, grounding herself in the texture of the mat. They stretched together without much instruction. Charlotte moved slowly, deliberately, giving Stacy space to follow at her own pace. Sometimes their movements mirrored each other. Sometimes they didn't. It didn't matter. The gym hummed around them. Someone laughed loudly near the free weights. Music shifted tracks. A bell dinged softly at the front desk. Charlotte leaned forward into a stretch, exhaling through her nose. "You're holding less tension," she said casually. Stacy tilted her head. "You can tell?" Charlotte glanced at her, one corner of her mouth lifting. "I pay attention." The word sent a quiet thrill through Stacy's chest. She looked away. focusing on the stretch, on the way her muscles lengthened and eased. It shouldn't matter. Thought came back out of habit now, thinner than before. Less convincing. Afterward, they walked together toward the lockers. Their shoulders brushed. Charlotte didn't move away. You doing anything after this? Charlotte asked. Stacy hesitated. The question was simple, unweighted on the surface. But inside her it touched something tender. I have dinner, she said. Charlotte nodded slowly. Family, yeah. Charlotte didn't ask more. She rarely did. That was part of what made Stacy feel safe. The space Charlotte left wasn't empty. It was respectful. They stood near the entrance, sunlight spilling in through the glass doors. For a moment, neither of them moved. Charlotte broke the silence gently. I'm going to the beach later, just to walk. It's too hot to do much else. Stacy's pulse quickened. Oh, not. Charlotte paused, recalibrated. Not an invitation, just saying. Stacy smiled despite herself. Okay. Charlotte smiled back. It lingered. That night, dinner stretched longer than Stacy wanted it to. Her mother talked. Her father nodded. The man, older, polished, smiling in a way that felt rehearsed, asked Stacy questions that skimmed the surface of her life without touching it. He talked about business, about stability, about plans. Stacy listened. She smiled. She answered politely. Inside, her thoughts wandered to the beach. To Charlotte, walking alone by the water. To the way the sun would catch in her hair. To the quiet companionship she imagined without knowing why. Later, alone in her room, Stacy sat on the edge of her bed, shoes still on. Her phone lay beside her. She picked it up, put it down, picked it up again. The message was simple. How was the beach? She stared at the screen, heart pounding as if she were about to confess something enormous. Finally, she sent it. The reply came faster than she expected. Quiet. Windy. Nice. A pause. Then another message. You okay? Stacy exhaled. Yeah, she typed. Just. Long night. Want company? Charlotte wrote. Then, almost immediately, not tonight. Just next time. Stacy smiled into the dark. I'd like that. The days that followed unfolded gently. Charlotte and Stacy found themselves moving together more often, leaving the gym at the same time, lingering over conversations that didn't need endings. They shared coffee again. They sat on opposite sides of small tables, knees brushing now without pretense. They talked about small things. Music, food, places they'd never been. One afternoon, Charlotte mentioned her move again. California still feels unreal sometimes, she said. Like I borrowed someone else's life. Stacy tilted her head. Does it feel like yours yet? Charlotte considered. With some people, yeah. The look she gave Stacy was open. Not demanding. Just honest. Stacy felt something settle inside her. They began walking together after workouts, slow loops around the block. The sun dipped lower each day, casting long shadows. The air smelled of salt and asphalt and flowers she couldn't name. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. One evening, they reached the corner where Charlotte usually turned off toward her car. Charlotte slowed, hesitated. There's a lookout up the hill, she said. Nothing special, just quiet. Stacy didn't answer right away. Her heart was loud in her ears. Okay, she said finally. They walked uphill together, the path narrowing. When they reached the lookout, the city spread out below them, lights just beginning to flicker on. The air was cooler here, wind brushing against their skin. They leaned against the railing, side by side. Charlotte rested her forearms on the metal, looking out. I come here when my head gets noisy. Stacy nodded. Does it help? Sometimes. Charlotte glanced at her. Sometimes it just gives the noise somewhere to go. They stood in silence. The stillness deepened. Stacy became aware of the space between them, the exact distance, the way their shoulders almost touched. She could feel Charlotte's warmth without contact. Her mind circled, familiar now. What if this is me? The thought didn't panic her. It grounded her. Charlotte shifted slightly, turning toward Stacy. The movement was small but intentional. Their arms brushed. Neither of them moved away. Charlotte's voice was quiet. Can I ask you something? Stacy's throat tightened. Yeah. Charlotte hesitated. The pause was careful, respectful. If I'm ever too much, you'll tell me, right? Stacy searched her face. The concern there wasn't about rejection, it was about care. I don't think you are, Stacy said softly. Charlotte's eyes held hers. Okay. They stayed like that, the city humming below them, the wind carrying distant sounds. Stacy felt an urge rise, gentle, insistent. Not urgency. Recognition. She didn't lean in. Not yet. Charlotte didn't either. They stood in the space between, breathing the same air, letting the moment exist without claiming it. When they finally turned back, walking down the hill together, Stacy felt changed, not dramatically, not visibly, just aligned. Later that night, lying in bed, she replayed the look on Charlotte's face, the softness in her voice, the way the question had been asked with care. She thought about the dinner again. The man. The future laid out for her like a map she hadn't chosen. She thought about the hill. The quiet. The way standing next to Charlotte felt like standing inside herself. Her phone buzzed. Home safe? Charlotte texted. Stacy smiled. Yeah, she replied. Thanks for walking with me. Pause. Anytime, Charlotte wrote. I mean that. Stacy lay back, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned. The same question returned, slower now, less sharp. What if this is me? She didn't answer it. She let it stay. Stacy's mother chose a Tuesday to make it sound harmless. It was an ordinary day, the kind Stacy usually trusted. Laundry turning in the machine, sunlight falling through the kitchen blinds in pale stripes. The smell of lemon dish soap still clinging to the sink. Her mother stood at the counter slicing strawberries with a careful, almost ceremonial focus, as if fruit could soften what she intended to say. Stacy came in barefoot, hair damp from the shower, wearing an old t-shirt that used to belong to no one in particular. She poured herself water. She drank. She tried to keep her shoulders loose. Her mother didn't look up. He asked about you again. Stacy's stomach tightened before her mind could catch up. Who? Her mother's knife pulsed mid-slice. A small, controlled pause. Don't do that. You know who. The strawberries bled onto the cutting board, bright red against pale wood. The sound of the knife resumed, steady, crisp, like an insistence. Stacy placed her glass down gently. Too gently. Mom. Her mother finally looked up, and the expression on her face wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was relief disguised as certainty. The kind of certainty that didn't need Stacy to agree, only to comply. He wants to take you to dinner this weekend, her mother said, voice light. Proper dinner, not like last time. Somewhere nice. Stacy swallowed. I already did dinner. Her mother waved a hand as if batting away a fly. That wasn't a dinner. That was meeting. This would be real. He's serious. Stacy felt her pulse in the base of her throat. The kitchen seemed smaller than it had a moment before. I don't want that, she said, and her voice surprised her, clearer than she expected. Her mother's eyes narrowed slightly, not in rage but in calculation. You don't know what you want. You're young, you're confused. Confused. The word slid under Stacy's ribs like something cold. I'm not confused, Stacy said, but she didn't elaborate. She couldn't. Not here. Not in this kitchen with lemon soap and strawberries and the sound of a life being managed. Her mother's mouth tightened. Then what is this? She asked quietly. This? Stalling? Stacy stared at her. I'm not stalling. You are, her mother said, softer now, and the softness made it sting more. You've been drifting. You go to the gym, you come home, you don't date anyone, people ask questions. Stacy's fingers curled around the edge of the counter. Who asks questions? Her mother's gaze flicked away. People. People meant family. Friends. Church acquaintances. Neighbors who smiled too much at the grocery store. Stacy felt heat rise behind her eyes. Not tears, not yet. Something hotter. So, this is about them. Her mother's face hardened just slightly. It's about your future. It's about your comfort, Stacy said, and immediately regretted it. Quiet shock moved across her mother's features, like a door slamming in another room. For a moment neither of them spoke. The house hummed gently. Refrigerator motor, distant traffic outside, the faint thud of the washing machine changing cycles. Life continuing, unmoved. Her mother set the knife down carefully. "Stacy," she said, voice low, controlled. "You are not going to throw away your life because you're having a phase." Stacy's breath caught. A phase. Her mother nodded once, as if giving Stacy a way out. "It happens to girls who spend too much time alone. Too much time online. Too much time with—" She stopped, and the stop was its own accusation. Stacy's skin prickled. She felt suddenly too aware of her bare feet on the tile. Too aware of her own body, standing there, existing in a way her mother could reframe into something shameful with a single word. Stacy forced her voice to stay level. "I'm not having a phase." Her mother stepped closer, the space between them shrinking in that quiet, domestic way that could feel like love or like control depending on the moment. "Then prove it," she said. Stacy stared. "Prove it how?" Her mother's eyes didn't blink. "Go to dinner, give him a chance, let him show you what real stability looks like." Stacy's throat tightened. She tasted metal. "And if I don't?" Her mother's gaze dropped to the strawberries, now neatly arranged on a plate, as if that plate mattered more than Stacy's face. "Then you're choosing something selfish," she said. "Something that will make your life harder. Something that will embarrass us." Us. The word made Stacy feel small. Like a child again. Like a daughter-shaped object being moved into place. Stacy didn't answer. She couldn't. The silence expanded, thick and heavy, full of everything she didn't dare name in this kitchen. Her mother picked up the plate and moved past her toward the table, ending the conversation with motion. "Think about it," she said over her shoulder. "And don't be dramatic." Stacy stayed at the counter long after her mother left the room, staring at the wet ring her glass had left behind. A small circle. Evidence of being there. It shouldn't matter. The thought returned automatically, but it didn't soothe her anymore. It only proved how deeply she'd been trained to deny herself. Later, at the gym, Stacy moved through her workout like someone wearing gloves. She could feel everything, but nothing reached skin. Charlotte was there, of course. She always was. Near the weights, correcting someone's posture. Laughing quietly at something a client said. Hair tied back tight, freckles bright against flushed skin. When Charlotte saw Stacy, her face changed, just a little. A soft opening. "Hey," Charlotte said, stepping closer as Stacy approached the stretching area. "You're quiet today." Stacy forced a smile. "Just tired." Charlotte studied her for a moment. "Okay." The way Charlotte said okay wasn't acceptance. It was patience. They stretched together after Stacy finished lifting. They rolled their mats out side by side, and the simple routine should have steadied Stacy. The familiar sound of fabric against rubber. The way Charlotte always took a moment to settle her breath before starting. But Stacy's body didn't relax. Her muscles stayed tense as if they were bracing. Charlotte noticed. She always did. "You want to talk?" Charlotte asked softly, once they'd been quiet long enough for the question to feel earned. Stacy's fingers worried the edge of the mat. "Not really." Charlotte nodded, no offense visible. "Okay, then we don't." They moved through stretches slowly. Charlotte demonstrated. Stacy followed. The gym noise rose and fell around them like waves, but inside the small space they shared, there was a tight stillness. At one point, Charlotte reached to adjust Stacy's shoulder, light touch, careful, and Stacy flinched. Not violently. Just enough. Charlotte's hand stopped midair. She didn't touch. A pause. Stacy's breath went shallow. She hated herself for it. Charlotte lowered her hand slowly, as if she'd been handed something fragile and didn't want to break it. "Sorry," she murmured. "It's not you," Stacy said quickly. Charlotte's eyes held hers. "Then what is it?" Stacy looked away. The mirror caught her face, blonde hair pulled back, cheeks flushed, eyes too bright. She looked like someone trying not to be seen. "It's just life," she said. Charlotte didn't push. She shifted slightly, giving Stacy space on the mat, on the air itself. "Okay," she said again, but quieter now. "I'm here." The words hit Stacy harder than they should have. She swallowed and focused on her breathing. Inhale. Exhale. The silence between them deepened, not comfortable, not empty. Charged with everything Stacy wouldn't say. After stretching, they walked toward the exit together. Outside, the late afternoon sun was thick, golden, clinging to everything. Heat radiated off the pavement. The air smelled like jasmine and exhaust and something sweet decaying in a trash bin nearby. Real life. Charlotte walked beside Stacy without crowding her. Their arms brushed once. Stacy felt it like a spark. Charlotte spoke carefully as if testing the air. "You want to get coffee?" Stacy's heart stuttered. Coffee was routine now. It was safe. It was the kind of closeness that didn't demand explanation. And still, today it felt dangerous, like even sitting across from Charlotte could tip something Stacy was barely holding upright. "I can't," Stacy said. Charlotte's head tilted. "Okay. Another day." Stacy nodded too quickly. "Yeah." Charlotte slowed near her car. She hesitated, then asked, very quietly, "Did I do something?" The question cut through Stacy's defenses with surgical precision. Stacy stopped walking. She turned to face Charlotte. The sunlight made Charlotte's green eyes look almost unreal. Bright, clear, impossible to lie to. "No," Stacy said, and her voice wavered. She cleared her throat. "No, you didn't." Charlotte watched her. "Then you're somewhere else." Stacy almost laughed. Almost cried. "Dealing with family stuff," she said finally. Charlotte's expression softened. "Do you want me to meet you somewhere? Not coffee? Just a walk. Somewhere quiet." The offer was gentle. No pressure. No demand. That was exactly what made it hard to refuse. Stacy's throat tightened. She could feel words rising, a confession pressing against her teeth. She imagined saying it plainly. "My mother thinks I'm sick. My father thinks I'm ungrateful. They want to trade me for stability. They want to fix me with a man." And then she imagined what it would mean if Charlotte knew. It would mean the gym wasn't just a gym anymore. It would mean Charlotte wasn't just a person who made Stacy feel alive. It would mean Stacy was making a choice, even by speaking. Fear flooded her, sudden and familiar. Stacy took a step back. The motion was small, but it created distance. Charlotte noticed immediately. Her body stilled, like she was bracing for impact. Stacy forced herself to smile. "I'm okay," she said, and the lie felt thick, clumsy. Charlotte didn't call it out, but her eyes darkened slightly, as if something in her had registered the truth even if she didn't name it. "Okay," Charlotte said. But this time the word didn't sound like patience. It sounded like restraint. Stacy nodded, already backing away emotionally, already retreating to the version of herself that survived by being easy. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said. Charlotte held her gaze for a beat too long. Then she nodded once. "Yeah." Stacy drove home with her hands tight on the steering wheel. The sunlight flashed through trees, strobing her vision. Her heart wouldn't slow down. At home, her father was waiting in the living room, sitting in his chair like he belonged to the whole world. The television was on, volume low. A news anchor spoke about something distant and irrelevant. Her father muted it when Stacy walked in. "Sit," he said. Stacy's stomach dropped. She sat. Her father looked at her with an expression that tried to be kind and failed. "Your mother tells me you're being difficult." Stacy's jaw tightened. "I'm not being difficult. I just don't want." Her father cut her off with a raised hand. "This isn't about what you want," he said, voice calm. "This is about what's best." Stacy stared at him. "Best for who?" He sighed as if she were exhausting. "For you. For us. For your future. You don't understand how the world works yet." The familiar condescension pressed down on her chest. Her father leaned forward slightly. "You will go to dinner this weekend," he said. "You will be charming. And you will stop acting like you're above it." Stacy's hands clenched in her lap. "Dad." He spoke over her. "He can give you a life, a real life. Not this. Drifting." Drifting. The word again, like her mother's. Like they'd rehearsed it. Stacy's breath turned sharp. "I'm not drifting." "You are," her father said, and something colder entered his tone. "And if you keep it up, you can find somewhere else to drift." The room went silent. Stacy felt the threat land fully. Not subtle. Not hidden. A line drawn. Her mouth went dry. "Are you saying you'd kick me out?" Her father's eyes didn't soften. "I'm saying we won't support choices that destroy your life." Stacy's vision blurred for a moment, not with tears, but with disbelief. She'd always known, somewhere deep, that love in this house came with conditions. but hearing it aloud made it real in a way she couldn't dismiss. Her father stood, conversation over. "Dinner is Saturday," he said, and turned the television back on. Stacy sat frozen, the anchor's voice filling the room like meaningless noise. Later, in her bedroom, she lay on her back and stared at the ceiling fan. The blades turned slowly, indifferent. Shadows moved across the ceiling in soft loops, repeating. It shouldn't matter. The thought returned, but now it sounded like a plea. Her phone lay beside her. She stared at it. She picked it up. Put it down. Picked it up again. She opened her messages with Charlotte. There were no new texts. Stacy's chest ached with it. She typed, "Can we talk?" Her thumb hovered over send. She imagined Charlotte's reply. Yes. She imagined meeting Charlotte somewhere quiet, telling her everything, letting Charlotte's presence steady her. She imagined relief so sharp it would feel like pain. Then she imagined her parents' faces if she chose that. Their disappointment turning to anger. The loss of home, of stability, of the illusion she'd been living inside. Fear tightened around her lungs. Stacy erased the message. She stared at the blank chat. Her finger trembled. She typed something else, smaller, safer. "Hey. Sorry I was weird today." She stared at it for a long time. Then she deleted it too. Silence. Her phone screen dimmed. She tapped it awake again, as if she could summon courage through motion alone. A thought circled, returning with slight shifts, refusing to let her go. What if this is me? What if I lose everything? What if I lose her without ever having her? No. Not that. Not exactly. It wasn't about having. It was about being. Being honest. Being real. Being alive in her own body instead of living like a polite ghost. Stacy turned onto her side and pressed her forehead into her pillow, breathing in the faint scent of laundry detergent and her own shampoo. She felt suddenly young, painfully small, caught between the woman her family wanted and the woman who kept showing up in Charlotte's gaze like a reflection Stacy could no longer ignore. The next day, Stacy went to the gym anyway. Routine. Appointment with herself. Charlotte was there, across the room, training someone near the cable machines. When Charlotte glanced up and saw Stacy, something flickered in her face. Hope, maybe. Then something guarded slid over it. Charlotte didn't come over right away. Stacy lifted a dumbbell. Set it down. Tried to focus. Minutes passed. The gym's music thumped. Someone shouted encouragement. The world kept moving around Stacy, as if nothing monumental was happening inside her. Finally, Charlotte's client left and Charlotte walked toward Stacy with measured steps. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Deliberate. When she reached Stacy, she stopped at a careful distance. "Hey," she said, voice neutral but not cold. Stacy's throat tightened. "Hey." Charlotte's eyes searched Stacy's face. "You okay?" The question was the same as always. But now it carried weight. Stacy forced herself to breathe. Inhale. Exhale. Words crowded her mouth. Too many. Too true. She didn't say them. Instead, she nodded once. Small, stiff. Yeah, she lied. Charlotte's gaze held hers for a long, quiet beat. The gym noise blurred around them, distant. Charlotte's voice lowered. "If you ever want to tell me what's going on," she said softly, "I'll listen." Stacy felt her chest tighten, pain and relief tangled together. Charlotte waited. Stacy's hand drifted toward her phone in her pocket, a reflex, as if the device could decide for her. She could say yes. She could say not now. She could say something that would change everything. Stacy opened her mouth, and then the bell above the front desk chimed as someone walked in, cutting through the moment. A coworker called Charlotte's name. The world intruded gently, but decisively. Charlotte's eyes stayed on Stacy's face for a second longer. Then she exhaled, slow. "I have to go," she said, and the word sounded like restraint more than obligation. Stacy nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah." Charlotte hesitated, as if she wanted to touch Stacy's arm, to offer something physical, comfort, anchoring. But she didn't. Her hands stayed at her sides. "Later," Charlotte said. Stacy managed, "Later." Charlotte turned away. Stacy watched her go, feeling moments slip past like something she'd almost held. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Not a text. A calendar reminder her mother had set on the shared family app. Dinner, Saturday, 7 p.m. Stacy's breath caught. She stood still in the middle of the gym floor, dumbbell at her feet, the notification glowing like a small sentence. She pulled her phone out and stared at the screen. Her thumb hovered over delete, then hovered over details, then hovered over nothing at all. Across the room, Charlotte looked back once, just once, as if she could feel Stacy's fracture from a distance. Stacy's thumb trembled. She didn't press anything. Not yet. Stacy deleted the reminder without looking at the screen long enough to feel brave. Her thumb pressed the option as if it were a reflex, as if the act could be made small by speed. The calendar entry vanished. The glow of the phone softened into the dull blue of the lock screen. For a second, she felt nothing but the thin relief of quiet. Then her pulse caught up. The air in the gym seemed suddenly too warm, too thin. Music was loud in the wrong way. Every sound had edges. A barbell clanked. A laugh rose and fell. Someone's sneaker squeaked across the floor, sharp as a warning. Stacy slipped her phone back into her pocket and stood there, still, while her body kept insisting something had happened. Because something had. Not in the room. Not in the eyes of anyone watching. But inside her, a line had been crossed. The first clean refusal she'd ever made without permission. Her hands shook slightly. She curled her fingers into fists until it stopped. Across the room, Charlotte moved with her client again, calm and professional, but something in her posture was different. Her attention flicked towards Stacy more than once, quick glances disguised as checking the room. Each time their eyes almost met, Stacy's chest tightened, and she looked away, furious at herself for still trying to disappear. She had spent her entire life becoming easy to misunderstand on purpose. Thought came like a bitter truth, simple enough to be unbearable. She moved through the rest of her workout with a strange, brittle focus. 10 reps. Rest. 10 reps. Rest. The counting gave her something to hold, something that didn't ask her to decide who she was. When she finished, she didn't head for the stretching area. She went to the locker room instead. The fluorescent lights there were unforgiving. Mirrors in every direction. Rows of metal lockers that smelled faintly of disinfectant and old sweat. A woman at the far bench talked on her phone, voice too loud, laughing at something Stacy couldn't hear. Stacy sat and stared at her own hands resting on her thighs. The skin around her nails was raw from picking, a habit she only noticed when she was cornered. She closed her eyes. What if this is me? The question surfaced again, but it sounded different now. Less like a fear, more like a doorway. Her phone buzzed. This time it wasn't a reminder. A text. From her mother. Dinner is still on. Don't be late. He's excited. Stacy's throat tightened. She stared at the words until they blurred. Then another message arrived, right after. Your father and I need to talk to you when you get home. Need. Not want. Not hope. Need. A word that meant decision had already been made without her. Stacy's stomach turned cold. She locked her phone and sat very still, listening to the sounds of the locker room. A hairdryer whining. A zipper. A cough. The ordinary world continuing with perfect indifference. She stood slowly, as if standing too fast would make her fall apart. When she walked out of the locker room, she didn't head toward the exit. She headed toward Charlotte. Charlotte was near the front desk now, wiping down a piece of equipment, towel in hand. Her hair was tied back, but loose strands had escaped, catching light like copper wire. She looked up and saw Stacy approaching. Something in Charlotte's face shifted immediately, attention sharpening, softness withdrawing, just enough to protect itself. Guarded hope. A careful readiness. Hey, Charlotte said. Stacy stopped a few feet away. Close enough to feel the heat of her, not close enough to touch. The distance was deliberate, a boundary Stacy didn't fully trust herself not to cross. Can we talk? Stacy asked. Charlotte's eyes widened slightly, then softened. Yeah, she said. Of course. Charlotte glanced around, then nodded toward the back hallway that led to the staff area. There's a quiet spot behind the storage room. Come on. Stacy followed. The hallway was cooler, the air less crowded with sound. The music faded. The gym noise became a muffled pulse. They passed a door with a small sign, staff only, and Charlotte pushed it open. Inside, the world shrank into something intimate and unpolished. A narrow space with stacked foam rollers, cleaning supplies, a rack of towels. The smell was sharp, bleach, detergent, rubber. There's a small bench against the wall and a single overhead light that made everything look too honest. Charlotte closed the door gently behind them. Not locked, just closed. Consent in the smallest things. Stacy noticed. Her chest tightened with gratitude she didn't know how to name. Charlotte leaned back against the opposite wall, arms relaxed at her sides, giving Stacy space. "Okay," she said softly. "What's going on?" Stacy opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She stared at Charlotte's collarbone, at the faint sheen of sweat there, at the way Charlotte's chest rose and fell with calm breathing. Stacy's own breath felt ragged by comparison. She forced it slower. Inhale. Exhale. "My family," Stacy began, and her voice cracked on the first word. Charlotte didn't move. Didn't interrupt. Her eyes stayed steady, green and patient, like a hand held out without grabbing. "They want me to." Stacy swallowed. "They want me to date someone. They've already decided. He's older. He's rich. He's safe." Charlotte's jaw tightened slightly. "Not anger. Restraint. And you don't want that?" "No," Stacy said, the word coming out sharper than she expected. She pressed her palm against her thigh, grounding herself in muscle and fabric. "I don't want any of it." Charlotte waited, still. Stacy's throat burned. She felt suddenly like she was standing on the edge of a cliff made entirely of language. "They think I'm confused," Stacy said. "They keep saying it like it's a kindness, like it's a rope they're offering me." Charlotte's eyes softened. "Confused about what?" Stacy laughed once, a small broken sound. "You know?" Charlotte didn't pretend not to, but she also didn't rush Stacy into it. Her voice stayed gentle. "Okay," she said. "Tell me." Stacy's heart pounded so hard it made her dizzy. She forced herself to look at Charlotte's face. "Really look." "I tried," Stacy whispered. "I tried to be what they wanted. For years. I thought if I did everything right, the feeling would go away. The wrongness. The emptiness." Charlotte's throat moved as she swallowed. Her hands stayed at her sides, but Stacy saw the impulse, an urge to reach out, contained. Stacy kept going before she could stop herself. "And then you showed up," she said, voice trembling. "And it didn't go away. It got louder. It got real." A pause. The air between them tightened, charged and silent. Charlotte's voice was very quiet. "Stacy." Stacy shook her head quickly. "I'm scared," she admitted, and the truth of it cut clean. "Not of you, not of this. I'm scared of losing everything. I'm scared of what happens if I stop pretending." Charlotte watched her for a long moment, then said softly, "What do you want?" The question was simple. It was brutal. Stacy's eyes burned. She blinked hard. The answer rose in her like a tide, inevitable. "I want to be able to breathe," she said. "I want to stop living like I'm performing. I want to—" She stopped, restarted. "I want you." The words fell into the small room like something dropped, heavy, irreversible. Charlotte didn't flinch. She exhaled slowly, as if she'd been holding her breath for days. Her gaze held Stacy's with an intensity that didn't demand anything, but didn't hide either. "Okay," Charlotte said. Just that. "Okay." A consent word. A grounding word. A door opening. Stacy's breath shook. "Okay?" Charlotte nodded once. "Yes," she said. "But only if it's what you really want. Not because you're cornered. Not because you want to escape them." Stacy swallowed. The care in Charlotte's caution made her feel both safer and more exposed. "It's what I want," Stacy said. "It's been what I want, and I didn't know how to say it." Charlotte's eyes flicked to Stacy's mouth, then back to her eyes. The movement was small, but unmistakable. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Charlotte took one slow step closer. Not sudden. Not stealing. Offering. Stacy didn't move away. Charlotte stopped within arm's reach. Close enough now that Stacy could smell her, clean sweat, detergent, something faintly citrus. The scent that had threaded itself into Stacy's days without permission. Charlotte's voice dropped. "Can I touch you?" Stacy's throat tightened and her answer came out as a breath. "Yes." Charlotte lifted her hand slowly, like she was approaching something sacred. Her fingertips brushed the side of Stacy's wrist first, barely there, testing the boundary. Stacy's skin flared warm at the contact, her pulse jumping beneath Charlotte's touch. Charlotte's hand slid lightly up Stacy's forearm, then paused, waiting again. Stacy whispered, "Please." The words surprised her. Charlotte's eyes darkened with something that looked like relief. Like longing contained too long. Charlotte's palm settled against Stacy's cheek. Warm. Steady. Stacy leaned into it before she meant to, like her body had been waiting for permission to stop holding itself apart. Her eyes fluttered shut for a moment, and the simple pressure of Charlotte's hand felt like something she could cry from. Charlotte's thumb moved once, a small stroke against Stacy's cheekbone, tender, deliberate. Stacy opened her eyes again. Charlotte was so close now that Stacy could see tiny flecks of gold in her green irises. Could see the faint line between Charlotte's brows, like she was holding herself back from moving too fast. Stacy's breath caught. Charlotte's voice was a whisper. "Still okay?" Stacy nodded, unable to trust words. Charlotte leaned in slowly. The kiss wasn't sudden. It arrived like an answer that had been forming in silence for weeks. Charlotte's mouth touched Stacy's gently at first, soft pressure, careful, asking. Stacy's lips parted on instinct, and something inside her gave way with a quiet, almost painful relief. Warmth spread through her chest and down into her stomach, a slow bloom. Her hands lifted without thinking, settling at Charlotte's waist, fingers curling into the fabric of Charlotte's tank top. The solidity of Charlotte's body under her palms made Stacy's knees feel weak. Charlotte exhaled against her mouth, a sound that felt intimate in a way that made Stacy's skin prickle. It deepened, not frantic, not greedy. Just more present, more certain. Charlotte's hand slid from Stacy's cheek to the back of her neck, fingers threading lightly into her hairline. Stacy's breath broke in a small gasp, and she hated how much of herself that sound gave away. No. Not that. Not exactly. She didn't hate it. She feared how true it was. Charlotte pulled back just slightly, their foreheads almost touching. Their breaths mingled, warm and uneven in the small bleach-scented room. Charlotte's eyes searched Stacy's face. "Hey," she murmured, voice rougher now. "Look at me." Stacy did. Charlotte's expression was open, almost vulnerable. "You don't have to do this alone," she said. "But I need you to know, this is your life, your choice." Stacy swallowed hard. The word choice vibrated through her like a tuning fork. "My dad said if I don't go to dinner, I can find somewhere else to live," Stacy said, voice shaking. Charlotte's jaw tightened. Her eyes flashed, then softened again. "Okay," she said carefully. "Then we plan. We don't panic." Stacy let out a shaky laugh that sounded like a sob. "I don't even know where to start." Charlotte's hand stayed at the back of her neck, grounding her. "Start with tonight," she said. "Come to my place. Just be somewhere you can breathe." Stacy's throat tightened. "I can't just..." Charlotte interrupted softly. "You can." The certainty in her voice made Stacy tremble. Stacy looked down, then back up. "What if they..." Charlotte's eyes held hers. "Let them be angry," she said quietly. "You've been holding their anger inside you for years. You don't have to keep doing that." Stacy's breath shook. She thought of her bedroom. The ceiling fan. The dinner reminder like a sentence. Her father's voice. Her mother's knife on strawberries. Then she thought of Charlotte's hand on her cheek. Warm. Steady. Real. Stacy whispered, "Okay." The word felt like stepping off a ledge and discovering air could hold her. Charlotte exhaled slowly, relief crossing her face like sunlight. She leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to Stacy's forehead. Brief, reverent, almost unbearably tender. "Okay," Charlotte echoed. They left the storage room quietly. Back in the gym, the world roared into focus again. Music, laughter, weights, ordinary life. But Stacy moved through it differently now. She walked beside Charlotte toward the exit, their shoulders brushing, and this time Stacy didn't flinch. Outside, the heat hit them like a blanket. The sun was lower, casting everything in gold. The air smelled like jasmine and hot pavement. Charlotte's car was parked near the curb, and Charlotte opened the passenger door without asking again. Stacy hesitated for half a second. Then she got in. The drive to Charlotte's apartment was quiet at first. Not awkward, full. Stacy watched the world pass through the window. Palm trees, traffic lights, people walking dogs, kids on bikes. ordinary scenes that felt surreal because Stacy's internal world had shifted under them. Charlotte drove one-handed, the other resting lightly on the gear shift. Her posture was calm, but Stacy noticed the tension in her jaw. Controlled anger, held back for Stacy's sake. At a red light, Charlotte glanced over. "Still okay?" Stacy swallowed. "I keep waiting for it to feel like I'm doing something wrong." Charlotte's eyes softened. "Does it?" Stacy stared at the dashboard, then shook her head. "No," she admitted. "It feels like I'm finally not lying." Charlotte exhaled, a quiet sound. "Good." Charlotte's apartment was small and clean, with plants in the windows and a couch that looked slept in. The air inside smelled faintly of sandalwood and laundry detergent, warm, domestic. A quiet life. Charlotte kicked her shoes off by the door. Stacy followed, suddenly aware of the vulnerability of stepping into someone's private space. Charlotte turned to her gently. "You can sit," she said. "You can shower, you can just exist." Stacy stood in the middle of the living room, unsure what to do with freedom. Her hands hovered near her sides as if waiting for instructions. It was absurd, and it made her want to cry. Charlotte watched her, then stepped closer slowly. "Come here," she said softly. Stacy didn't move at first. Then she did, one step, then another, until she was close enough to feel Charlotte's warmth again. Charlotte wrapped her arms around her, not tight, not trapping. Holding. Stacy's body resisted for half a second. Habit, fear, training. Then it collapsed into the embrace like something finally allowed to rest. Her breath broke. A small sound escaped her throat. She pressed her face into Charlotte's shoulder and inhaled. Sandalwood, skin, faint citrus. The scent that had haunted her now became shelter. Charlotte's hand moved slowly up Stacy's back, a gentle rhythm. They stood there for a long time. The narrative did not advance. Life existed. Stacy's tears came quietly, not dramatic. Just the body letting go of something it had been gripping too long. Charlotte didn't speak. She didn't ask questions. She simply stayed, her presence steady, her breathing a calm counterpoint to Stacy's shaking. When Stacy finally pulled back, her eyes were wet and her face was flushed. She wiped at her cheeks with the back of her hand, embarrassed. Charlotte lifted her hand and wiped a tear from Stacy's cheek with her thumb, the same gesture from the storage room, repeated now in a different light. A ritual. An anchor. "Nothing to be embarrassed about," Charlotte murmured. Stacy swallowed. "I feel like I'm ruining everything." Charlotte's mouth tightened. "You're not ruining anything," she said. "You're refusing to be traded." The bluntness of it made Stacy's breath catch. Charlotte's gaze stayed steady. "Do you want to call them?" she asked softly. "Or do you want to wait?" Stacy's stomach twisted. "If I call, I'll fold." Charlotte nodded. "Then we wait." They moved through the evening slowly. Charlotte made tea. Mint, Stacy noticed, the smell sharp and clean. They sat on the couch with mugs warming their hands. The television stayed off. The quiet was thick, soft, intimate. Stacy stared at the steam rising from her mug. "I don't know who I am without trying," she admitted. Charlotte's voice was gentle. "You're still you," she said. "Just without the cage." Stacy laughed once, shaky. "That sounds easy when you say it." Charlotte's eyes flicked to her mouth, then back to her eyes. "It wasn't easy," she said quietly. "I just chose myself anyway." Stacy's chest tightened at the phrase "chose myself." The words settled inside her, repeating softly. "Chose myself." They didn't talk about labels. They didn't talk about what this meant long term. They stayed inside what was real. The feeling of being in the same room, the warmth of tea, the quiet companionship of two bodies learning to exist without armor. Later, Charlotte stood and offered Stacy one of her shirts to sleep in, soft cotton, faintly scented with detergent and Charlotte's skin. Stacy held it for a moment, fingers curling into the fabric as if it were proof of something. In the bathroom, Stacy washed her face, stared at herself in Charlotte's mirror. Her eyes looked different again, still frightened, but clearer. Like someone who had stepped into a room she'd been told was forbidden and found it was simply hers. When she came back out, Charlotte was in the doorway of the bedroom, hair down now, face bare, looking more human than ever. Less like the impossibility Stacy had invented, more like a woman who had chosen a life and kept choosing it. Charlotte held out her hand. Stacy hesitated, then took it. The contact sent a familiar warmth through her, but now it didn't feel like danger. It felt like truth made physical. They lay in bed side by side, fully clothed, the sheet cool against Stacy's legs, the room dim, except for faint city light leaking through blinds. The air conditioner hummed softly. Outside, someone's car alarm chirped once, then stopped. World continuity. Life intruding gently. Stacy stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Charlotte turned her head slightly. "You're thinking." Stacy exhaled. "Always." Charlotte's hand found hers under the sheet, fingers threading together. "What's the loudest thought?" Stacy swallowed. "That tomorrow I'm going to wake up and it'll all be impossible again." Charlotte's thumb stroked Stacy's knuckles once, small, grounding. "Then tomorrow we do it again," she murmured. "We wake up. We breathe. We don't go back into the lie." Stacy's chest tightened. "You make it sound simple." Charlotte's voice was quiet, intimate. "It's not simple," she said. "It's just worth it." Stacy turned her head and looked at Charlotte in the dim light. Charlotte's eyes caught hers, steady even in shadow. Stacy whispered, barely audible, "I'm scared." Charlotte's expression softened. "I know." Stacy's throat tightened. "Stay?" Charlotte's answer came without hesitation. "Always." The word was not a promise of forever. It was a promise of presence, of this moment, of the next breath. Stacy closed her eyes and let the word settle inside her, repeating with slight shifts. "Stay. Stay with me. Stay inside the truth." In the morning, Stacy woke to the sound of a kettle. For a second she forgot where she was. Then she smelled coffee and mint tea and the faint sandalwood scent of Charlotte's apartment, and her body remembered before her mind fully caught up. The fear returned immediately, sharp and familiar, like a reflex. Then Charlotte walked into the bedroom doorway with 2 mugs, hair messy, face soft with sleep. "Morning?" Charlotte said quietly. Stacy sat up, sheet clutched around her waist as if she needed armor. "Morning." Charlotte set 1 mug on the bedside table. "Drink," she said, "before your thoughts eat you alive." Stacy laughed once, startled. "Is that your professional advice?" Charlotte's mouth curved. "Yes." Stacy took the mug. The warmth seeped into her hands. She inhaled. The smell of coffee grounded her in the present. They sat together on the edge of the bed, shoulder to shoulder, sipping. The silence between them was gentler now, still charged, but less brittle. Stacy's phone buzzed. She froze. Charlotte didn't reach for it. Didn't demand. She simply watched Stacy's face. Stacy pulled the phone from the nightstand. Her mother. 3 missed calls. 2 texts. Her father. 1 missed call. Stacy's stomach turned. Charlotte's voice was low. "Do you want to answer?" Stacy stared at the screen until it dimmed. "Chose myself." The phrase returned, quieter but steady. Stacy looked at Charlotte. "If I answer, I'll go back," she whispered. "I'll apologize. I'll make it small." Charlotte nodded slowly. "Then don't," she said. "Or answer differently." Stacy's breath caught. "Differently how?" Charlotte's eyes held hers. "Truth," she said gently. "A small truth if that's all you can manage, but truth." Stacy's chest tightened. Her hands shook slightly. She swallowed. She tapped her father's number before she could change her mind. It rang. Once. Twice. Her father answered, voice already hard. "Where are you?" Stacy's throat burned. She forced her voice steady. "I'm not coming home right now." A pause, dangerous, loaded. "What do you mean you're not coming home?" her father snapped. Stacy's heart pounded. She looked at Charlotte, who didn't move, didn't interfere, just stayed, her gaze steady, her presence like a hand on Stacy's spine. Stacy breathed in. Exhaled. "I'm not going to dinner," Stacy said. The words landed with a strange calm. Like gravity. Silence on the line. Then her father's voice, colder than before. "So you're doing this," he said. "You're choosing this." Stacy's mouth went dry. "I'm choosing my life," she said, and the phrase surprised her with its clarity. Her father laughed once, sharp. "Your life? You're throwing it away." Stacy's eyes burned. She swallowed hard. "No," she said. "I'm stopping you from deciding it for me." Her father's breathing came through the phone, heavy. "If you don't come home," he said slowly, "don't bother coming back." Stacy's chest tightened. The threat landed fully. Final. Clean eye. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Charlotte's hand slid over Stacy's knee, warm through the fabric of the sheet. A touch that said, "You are here. You are not alone." Stacy's voice came out small but steady. "Okay," she whispered. The word didn't mean agreement. It meant acceptance of reality. Her father's voice rose. "Don't you dare." Stacy ended the call. Her hands shook violently now. She stared at the phone, then set it down as if it were something that could burn her. The room felt too quiet. Charlotte moved closer, not rushing, and wrapped an arm around Stacy's shoulders. Stacy leaned into her, breath breaking in a small sob she didn't try to hide. Charlotte pressed her lips to the top of Stacy's head, a gentle kiss. "You did it," she murmured. Stacy shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I just lost my home." Charlotte's voice was quiet, firm. "You lost a cage," she said. "Not a home." Stacy's body trembled. She clutched Charlotte's shirt sleeve, fingers curling into fabric. Another anchor, another proof. They stayed like that for a long time. The narrative did not advance. Life existed. After the shaking passed, Stacy wiped her face again, embarrassed by how raw she felt. Charlotte handed her a tissue, then sat with her in silence while the coffee cooled. Eventually Stacy spoke, voice hoarse. "What do I do now?" Charlotte's eyes were gentle. "Now we make a life," she said. "Slowly, one day at a time, we find you your own place when you're ready. We figure out money, work, logistics." A small smile. "The boring parts." Stacy let out a shaky laugh. "The boring parts." Charlotte nodded. "The real parts." Stacy stared at the mug in her hands. The surface of the coffee had gone still, reflecting the dim light like dark glass. She felt hollow and full at the same time, grief and freedom braided together. She looked at Charlotte. "And us?" Charlotte's gaze held hers, unflinching. "Us," she said softly, "if you want it. No pressure, no rush." Stacy's throat tightened. She reached out and touched Charlotte's wrist lightly, a mirror of Charlotte's first touch in the storage room, testing, asking. "I want it," Stacy said. Charlotte's eyes darkened with emotion. She leaned in and kissed Stacy again, slow, tender, deliberate. Stacy's lips parted, and this time she didn't freeze. She met Charlotte with softness, with presence, with a quiet hunger that didn't feel like desperation anymore. It felt like home, remade. When they pulled back, their foreheads rested together. Stacy breathed in, tasting coffee and warmth and something she'd been denied for too long. Truth. Later, they went for a walk. Not to celebrate. Not to escape. Just to keep moving through the world now that Stacy's old map had burned. The sidewalk was warm under their sneakers. The sun sat high and indifferent. They passed people walking dogs, carrying groceries, living ordinary lives. Stacy felt oddly invisible and exposed at once, as if the world should notice what she'd just done. No one did. The world kept moving. Charlotte's hand brushed Stacy's, then threaded their fingers together naturally. Stacy's breath caught. She looked down at their joined hands, Charlotte's tan fingers, Stacy's pale ones, the simple physical fact of connection. A woman pushed a stroller past them. A teenager skateboarded by. A man watered his front lawn. Life continuing, unconcerned. Stacy felt tears threaten again, but this time they were quieter. Less grief, more astonishment. "You okay?" Charlotte asked softly. Stacy nodded. "I didn't think I'd ever get to do this," she admitted. "Just walk, hold someone's hand, not hide." Charlotte squeezed her hand once. "You do now," she said. They stopped at a small market and bought fruit, strawberries, without meaning to. Stacy laughed at the coincidence, then went quiet, remembering her mother's knife, the cutting board, the word phase. Charlotte noticed the shift. "Hey," she said gently. "You're allowed to miss them." Stacy swallowed. "I don't know what I feel." Charlotte nodded. "That's okay." They went back to Charlotte's apartment and washed the strawberries together at the sink. Stacy held them under running water, watching the red deepen as they soaked, watching her own hands move in a simple task. Charlotte stood beside her, shoulder close, presence steady. Nothing dramatic. Micro-life. The kind of life Stacy had never fully inhabited because she'd always been bracing for the next demand, the next performance. Charlotte dried the strawberries with a paper towel and handed one to Stacy. Stacy bit into it. Sweet, sharp, real. Juice on her tongue. She swallowed and felt the taste linger, bright and alive. Charlotte watched her with a small smile. Good? Stacy nodded, mouth full. Yeah. Charlotte reached up and wiped a drop of juice from the corner of Stacy's mouth with her thumb, an intimate gesture so ordinary it made Stacy's chest ache. A repeated action. A new ritual. Stacy looked at Charlotte's face and felt something settle deep inside her. A fixation that wasn't frantic anymore. It was steady. This is me. Not a phase. Not confusion. Not a mistake. A truth that had taken 23 years to find the language. That evening, Stacy sat on Charlotte's couch with her phone in her lap. She stared at her mother's name in her contacts list. Charlotte sat beside her, not touching, not hovering, just present. Stacy's thumb hovered over the call button. She didn't press it. Not yet. She wasn't ready to speak to her mother from this new self. She needed time to live in her choice until it stopped feeling like a fresh wound. Charlotte's voice was quiet. You don't have to do everything today, she said. Stacy exhaled slowly. I know. She leaned her head back against the couch and closed her eyes. Charlotte's shoulder pressed lightly against hers. The world outside the window softened into dusk, birds calling once and then fading into quiet. Stacy's mind circled the same thought again, but now it returned like a gentle tide instead of a storm. Chose myself. She didn't know what tomorrow would look like. She didn't know how long her parents' silence would last, or if it would break into something worse. She didn't know the shape of her future yet. But she knew this. She could breathe. And beside her, Charlotte breathed too. Steady, warm, real. Like a promise that didn't need to be said aloud. Some truths don't arrive like lightning. They arrive like warmth you stop refusing. What would it mean to choose yourself even when the world calls it selfish? Some stories don't end when the moment fades. They stay with us, asking to be felt. If this story awakens something you recognize, you're welcome to share your truth in the comments. And if this journey stayed with you, consider subscribing to Secret Garden Stories and sharing it with someone who might feel seen. Your support helps the space grow, a world with more love, more honesty, and less silence. Thank you for being here.